Hello everyone and welcome to Roll2Cast Season 2, the post-season discussion show. My name is Chris. I'm joined by our Season 1 storyteller and player in the vampire game, Phil Harker-Smith.
Hello.
And I'm also joined by our musical composer, Paul Goodman.
Hello.
Paul, this is the first time our listeners have met you. We've been collaborating with you for a long time, but why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Will do, thank you. My name's Paul Goodman. I'm from the podcast One Good Thing. Me and fellow co-host / brains behind the operation, Paul Salt, watch a bad film every week and try to find the good things about them because we believe no film is truly worthless. It comes close. Some weeks, but we have been victorious in our mission every week until now, and it's been too many years, so I think we're going to be okay.
You'll make it through. We've also worked with you before, but in this podcast, we worked with you. We collaborated with you as for music. You composed and created the tracks for both seasons of Roll2Cast, both Cyberpunk and Vampire.
I did, yeah. It's been quite a journey.
So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about how the tracks came about, what the process was, where the inspirations for them came, how we collaborated, what the process was there. And because Season 1 came first, I'm going to hand over to my good friend Phil, and he is going to talk about Cyberpunk.
Cool. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you, Paul, for your really hard work on this, and just commend you for how much the music has really brought to the storytelling, the acting, and the show in general. It really has elevated it. So I want to say thank you for that.
You're too kind, man.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how the collaboration actually kind of came about and how we ended up kind of partnering up on the project?
Yeah, sure. So I'm sure you can pitch in at times, but it started with our collaborations with Shut Up and Take My Podcast and One Good Thing. I think Sean approached us, and Paul and I are both introverted, antisocial Londoners, so we weren't going to go approaching any podcast anytime soon. And suddenly, we had this opportunity to work with you guys, and sort of 10 episodes of One Good Thing and 5 to 10 of Shut Up later. We're just going and going and going, and last time around we ended up with Pass Through from You, which if anybody here hasn't seen,
my God.
It is a technical masterpiece and a spiritual one. But it actually came about, I mentioned this in one of our episodes actually recently. Sean mentioned how he liked the jingles, and I think you guys in one of your episodes discussed how much you loved how crap they sounded, and
yes.
Which usually intentional. And I came down to Adelaide, and I think we got talking about about tabletops, and you brought up that you were going to be doing a Cyberpunk 2020 campaign.
Yeah, it was sort of in its nascent stages at that point.
And I went, oh, brilliant, yeah, I'd love to join in. I'd love to play. And and then you sat on this for about 2 weeks going, oh, God, how am I going to tell him that that's not what I was going to ask?
I felt very British about the whole thing, and I had to ask the rest of Baby Beard and be like, he's misunderstood what I've said. What do I do? Do I incorporate him now that am I committed now?
I mean, I've got the whole campaign written, but sure, I guess I could include him.
It felt very schoolyard gossipy. I've told him this thing, but he's misunderstood, and it was very cute.
Yes,
the pair of us. What are we like? But once you finally revealed to me the nature of the invite, it was as exciting because I thought, oh great, I get to work on it but be by myself
and not have to travel to Adelaide.
Yeah. once a year, it's
that's enough for anyone.
But then I thought, okay, well that makes more sense. So from then on, really, it was just about getting to know the world, and because I'm pretty heavily into electronic music, but cyberpunk isn't something I'd explored all that thoroughly. There was a real learning process there.
Well, actually, that's a good point to ask, is what musical background do you come from? What music interests do you come from, and what composing interests? What genre of work do you come from?
Yeah, so it's, other than crap podcast jingles, it's developed over the years. When I grew up, I wanted to play the drums for the longest time, and my music teacher took my audition and went, you should play the double bass. So I was misdirected for many years. As a small malnourished English boy carrying a comedically oversized instrument around on his back. And after that, I realized that guitars are easier and cooler. So I just sort of did that for quite a few years and did the whole traveling with my guitar over my shoulder nonsense. Yeah, just without any of the making like lasting friendships stories to go along with it.
So you didn't become a rocker boy?
Oh, at heart, yes, but in practice, and evidently no. And then, but probably from around, I think 15, 16, I got into Fruity Loops. I think before that, it was like a free music maker on Windows or something. And at the time, I was making loads of chiptune 8-bit masterpieces. And from then on, it was sort of learning enough to then go, oh, okay, this program's probably better. So I'll move on to Reason, for example, because the Prodigy use Reason. And it's probably been, from about the age of 16, 17, getting into electronic music. Because obviously this is the time of nu metal. So that gripped me for a while. And still does. Best music genre of all time.
Hard agree.
Do you think it's enhanced by the addition of the occasional rap breakdown?
Yeah, I like to just grab the mic occasionally and go, hey, haha, and just see where it takes me. But I content myself just to have occasional song titles in parenthesis, like a Coheed and Cambria song, and that usually does it for me nowadays. But then, taste develop, and I got into psytrance specifically when I turned 18, moved to London and started going to loads of London bridge parties, and just pretty much became obsessed with creating an authentic psytrance beat, because I don't know how much you've listened to, but it's a very intricate, quite like technically precise genre, and it has very precise requirements. So it's really frustrating. It's just been a really useful way of spending 2 decades. Other than that, the music that I made, it's such a weird mix that often comes across as pretentious, but is going from Lemon. Well, most of the songs are about 10 minutes long, and it's just
that's fine.
Oh, it's what I love.
It's what I love.
Yeah,
that's what I love with all my heart. And
making these odd drones in your basement, like Godspeed You Black Emperor or something.
Yes, exactly. And I think when I listen to that and hear them put 15 minutes of static in between 2 tracks, I think it's nonsense. But when I do it, I think actually
it's genius.
Yeah, because I can hear where I've tweaked it and introduced the ARP 3 minutes and 48 seconds in, and I've just been releasing the cutoff ever so slightly for 7 minutes after that, and it's actually genius. But like ranging from that sort of stuff to weird boppy Lemon Jelly and going into Boards of Canada type stuff, and just anything really that grabbed my interest. So
if that's pretentious, you can call me pretentious, because I love both of those things.
It is when you do it all in one song. And,
fair enough.
But so I was completely directionless for about 20 years. So just did stuff for me,
and nothing has changed.
Yeah, pretty much.
Let's bring it back down to sort of like how we kind of put the music together for the season 1 of Rollcast specifically.
Yeah, please do.
So
someone stop
going mainstream is what we end up calling it. And I guess it was, the thing I want to say is that for both of us, for all of us really, it was a completely new venture. And so we didn't really know what we wanted or what we needed.
Yeah.
And so we just sort of started with kind of influences, and we did that sort of the same on the acting and performance side as well. We watched Akira, and we talked about the media that we really enjoyed, and we kind of did the same thing, I guess. We talked about Blade Runner and sort of soundtracks for things that we really liked. Something that has popped into my mind recently is the old phrase, the old aphorism, talking about music is like dancing about architecture.
Yeah, very sexy.
Yeah, but it's also this kind of difficult mismatch. And so when we started to put things together, Paul thrives, you thrive on feedback, and you really like to talk about your tracks and how they sit and how they feel.
Yeah, I get validation.
It was this whole kind of I had to find this new vocabulary of talking about music. It's not something I think about very intensely in my life. I'm a very literary kind of minded person. So suddenly I'm like, can I get something that's a bit more crunchy?
Twangy? Yeah.
Twangy? This wispy, and trying to find this sort of translation and this language between us to take us from influences to product. And how did you find that from my end in terms of like the feedback and talking about the music.
Well, I also come from a fairly literary background. Before, properly giving music most of my time, I wrote an awful lot, loads of fiction, and just take very easily to it. And so,
where can people buy your book?
Oh, they can get it on Amazon.
What's it called?
It's called Doghead.
Oh, what a good plug.
Dockhead, and it's an existential, meta-referential, metatextual book about the usefulness of art when a real life tragedy hits. And
so not pretentious at all.
No, the main character does talk about how Amon Tobin's Splinter Cell is one of the most groundbreaking albums of all time. And I do you know what? Coincidentally, I agree. Yeah, so I've always found getting feedback from someone like Ellen, for example, who is sort of musically minded and terminologically minded. I always have to ask her to clarify what a term actually means. So sometimes when I get something from you, which is the kind of woolly thing I would say, trying to describe music, then it actually makes a lot of sense. But obviously can't speak for other musicians. But for me, it's always something internal, and I very rarely put it into words. So it's a tricky one. It's definitely something that I intuit more than sit down and say, okay, what I'm going to go for here is this specifically. So it did feel quite organic, and I think none of it felt forced, which was pretty essential.
I want to talk about the track we ended up using for the intro.
Yes.
Because that intro, I really like it. It has this kind of wonderful, kind of electrifying build up to it that excites people for the next kind of half hour of drama and excitement that's about to hit their ear holes. We quickly kind of pivoted to like, okay, what are we going to need to kind of highlight the various moods that the players are in? Which of those did you find most kind of easy to kind of glom onto?
Anything action oriented is always quite a fun, easy one for me, because I tend to just like music as loud as possible.
Which is the opposite of what you need for a backing track.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, my favorite tracks from the whole soundtrack are going to be ones like Dangerous Citizens and I think it's Night City 2, just because Night City 2 is particularly good at setting a scene without having a soundscape. The world is really well realised, and I wanted to have this space where the characters had agency outside of the world at the same time, and I wanted to sort of get across that there was this attitude and there were these personalities and they're all sort of invading this world. So yeah, Night City 2 is particularly good at that. Yeah, I suppose Dangerous Citizens is the other one, just because it manages to incorporate a lot of the dissonance of what I wanted to get into this soundtrack.
The other thing that I found sort of you brought to me, and I had never really considered, is making a motif for the characters.
Right, yeah.
The route that people have when they're listening is through the characters. It's through their voices and what they say and the decisions they make. How did you approach making, say, a track for a personality like Bob's?
A lot of what goes into it is closing my eyes and winging it and hoping that it turns out right. But there's obviously a lot of, as well as getting to know the world, which is helped to feel quite well established by existing groundwork. Yeah, all this stuff's established. There's, you have a whole musical genre, and I think they just both feed off of each other. So there's all this stuff there to pull from and be influenced by. When it came to the characters, there's a lot of talking to the players, trying to just figure out just a lot. It's stuff you wouldn't even think to ask usually. But I found just getting to know as much as possible was always really useful. I think you guys provided fairly lengthy bios, and then feedback as well was just super important. It's all well and good when I'm sitting by myself and doing a 10-minute track and going, well, I think this should go particularly weird here, and I'll up the cutoff by 3% here. But when you've got this character that, Chris, Sean and Ellen had created, and I assume a lot of love had gone into, and you must, assume you still feel fondness for these characters. It's another thing entirely to then come up with this track and go, hey, hope you like this.
This represents your creation.
Yeah, I've taken everything that existed in your head in a very specific way, and I've given it my very specific interpretation of that.
So it feels like a bit of a responsibility.
Definitely. It's definitely a nerve-wracking experience. And I found that time and again, working with you guys, the character leitmotifs are the most stressful ones.
But for me, they're definitely some of my favourite tracks. I think Gibatron there's such a madcap, fun energy to it. It somehow manages to kind of convey this kind of unhinged nature of the character by its kind of incongruity.
It almost feels like luck sometimes. If I'd have been great at sticking to the cyberpunk mission statement and just trying to sound like Perturbator,
yes,
for example, then that probably wouldn't have come out the way it did. I mean, for Bob, that's exactly how it needed to come out. It switches style a few times throughout. It changes beats, and it's just very twisty and turny and restless a track, I think.
And I think as well, I don't think it's necessarily luck. It's you getting into the world of Cyberpunk 2020, a game that's been around for what now, nearly 40 years, right?
Oh,
and
God.
taking all of that cultural history, all of that art history, all of that kind of accrued influence, and then taking our stuff, which we provided in terms of character sheets, in terms of character bios, in terms of what we intended to do with these characters, you then filtering all that through yourself as an artist, as a musical artist. And, it sounds wanky, but it's true. That's what you do. You're filtering it through yourself and you go, right, cool, how is this going to work? How is this going to operate? What am I feeling from this? What are my impulses from that? And what conclusions can I make from that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is the nature of a collaborative project. You're bringing a very particular feel or an ambience or very specific shade of something to the project. And I always see it as being very similar in one way to adapting a novel. Cinema is a very completely different medium. You can't just film it like a novel on a screen. You have to think, what are the strengths of the medium that I'm working in and how can I make this my own thing? Which is why just adaptations, it's always such a mixed end product.
And also, it's important that we talk to you about this because ultimately your artistic decisions color the characters back as well.
Yes.
They highlight qualities that we as the people who just made some characters and played them didn't intend to be highlighted. That's the equal kind of nature of collaboration, is that not only are we going, here's what I want from this track and here's what I'm feeling from this track, when you return with that music, it highlights things that we didn't intend, and that's fantastic. That's great.
It's really good to know that there's sort of an extra dimension there just waiting for me to step in and fill it,
Yeah.
So there's this really great moment in about halfway through season 1 where Cassie plays a show and she finishes her show with one of her signature tracks. And she is a rock boy or rock girl, whatever you want to call it. And part of, a huge part of her identity is that she is a performing artist. She makes music. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about working with Ellen to create kind of in-world tracks?
God, it was so exciting. It was a completely new challenge as well. On top of already suddenly doing a collaborative project and having to submit my own stuff. With Ellen, I think you were discussing this in one of the between season episodes last time around and, likened it to the Postal Service, who did write an album using the Postal Service, sending things back and forth, which is kind of how it happened, except if we were a band, we'd be called the Dropboxes or something, which isn't as cool. But we'd make it cool.
I don't know. It sounds good.
Dropboxed?
There you go.
Dropbox isn't too bad. Yeah, okay. Well, there we go, Ellen. There's potential future for us. Yeah, very, very similar. Ellen was sending over some a cappella versions of her couple of tracks. I then went away and listened to it again and again and tried to sort of put a few things over it that might work. And then I just kept doing that and doing that and doing that until I found something that really fit. And again, it was about trying to find something that was it supposed to suit cyberpunk, or was it supposed to suit somebody who was in this world and making her own music, which is what I opted for in the end. And it had the same grungy elements that cyberpunk sometimes brings, but for the most part, it was about trying to make it Cassie's own, which again is an extension of getting to know this character, as well as writing a leitmotif, writing something that she herself would write.
And then she would re-record what she'd sung a cappella that now to try and match the music that you had made, and then send that back, right? And then you would adjust that.
I mean, they were both really cool, both Take Back the Night and Rubber Veins. And I've just said two things in quick succession there, so you don't have to sample both of them. But Rubber Veins in particular, I thought was brilliant from Ellen for giving me this insight into her character.
Yeah, the lyrics really feel like a raw nerve.
Yeah, and Ellen really gave it everything for singing those vocals. Singing those vocals, you see what I mean? It's not a particularly technical term, but she put a lot of soul and a lot of her character into it, and that was just so helpful for getting these tracks together. Look, if she's up for doing a Cassie Glass album at some point, and she can find me some time, that would be amazing. Both of those things would be great.
We'll make it a Patreon unlock.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
If you've been thinking of a reason to go on Patreon, now that's the reason.
Yeah.
Get a Cassie Glass album happening.
I'd do it. I've already done it.
Thank you. Do you want to maybe go up to the next tier, though?
Do I? Do you?
Yes, I shall give all my worldly possessions to Baby Beard Media. I could probably talk about the individual tracks for Cyberpunk all day. I feel like I barely touched the surface, but there is another season of Rollercast that you also collaborated on. Vampire the Masquerade. So I'll let Chris, as the storyteller and creator for that season, take the lead on that instead.
Thanks, mate. So we had one season in the bag at this point, and so I think for both of us there was a sense of we had something to learn from and something to draw from.
Definitely.
Do you remember how it started? Because I'm hazy in my brain, my old age.
Well,
as the youngest of us three.
It gets better for a couple of years and then it starts getting worse again.
Oh, good. Yeah. I'm looking for my second wind. Fantastic.
I can't remember when that was, though.
Oh, good. But it's been and gone, has it? Yeah.
It certainly has. The Vampire was... God, the process... I don't know. It started out pretty similarly. It's about just throwing a lot of shit out there and seeing what sticks in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a couple more missteps in the very beginning with, writing stuff and realizing, okay, this is not quite the direction I need to be going in. So I felt there's a bit more fine tuning there, and definitely, learning from going mainstream, how we were going to make that work moving forward definitely gave that a different sort of feel.
Yeah, I definitely remember early on being pretty prescriptive in the direction that I wanted to go with the music of it. And also, thanks to the Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines video games, we had and another album created by Vampire the Masquerade, which I think is called the Succubus Club, which has a whole bunch of artists performing tracks as if they're as representative of clans. We were able to have quite an extensive music history for a game that isn't quite as old as Cyberpunk 2020, but all of that field was good work. By narrowing it quite early, it's like, well, now everything is kind of kosher and good.
I think that really helped. Interestingly, I was actually officially down to play this one, but then we couldn't find a weekend that suited us all.
That's right. You were actually going to play a Malkavian.
I was going to play a Malkavian. Yes, some interesting connections. God, who knows? I don't think I'd have survived listening back to the episodes now and how panicky everybody is. Maybe it's for the best. I'm alive now.
They might have killed your character.
They might have done. I'd have just been able to walk around Adelaide and check out the sights. But yeah, I mean, I remember listening to the album and getting real Massive Attack vibes off of the first couple of tracks, and getting a feel of a particular time, where you got Marilyn Manson and Clint Mansell and all these people. All two of these people.
It was a time where you could wear leather unironically, as a trench coat.
Yeah, going from there was really interesting, especially because of the idea I had, the world of Vampire the Masquerade, where Cyberpunk felt like these characters with agency moving through this established world. The characters felt very trapped by this world for me. This whole sort of the politics of it is like a dance, and it's ongoing.
They feel sort of very at the mercy of their circumstances, right?
Yes, exactly. The world is perceived through paranoia. It feels like to me, especially listening back to the episodes. It doesn't ever feel like the world we're seeing is the world as it is. You know, indeed, what does that even mean? We're seeing it through these three people who have no power to speak of. They're just being moved like pawns.
That's right, like a bit of a dance. The leitmotif, I would say, as it's named in a lot of the tracks, are waltzes.
Yeah.
A very structured, very clearly defined dance, which has very strict rules, and that came across musically. Talk me through how you came to that decision.
It actually just started with making a decision about which instruments I wanted to use, and the solemnity of the world that I was reading about and getting from you, especially when I was creating my character. I don't ever remember making the conscious decision in the beginning anyway, to say, hey, everything that Chris just said about the waltz and its rules and it being very, very strict. I think I just started with what I felt like was a fairly spooky, conspiratorial melody, and then as it was coming out, it just felt completely natural to put it in the terms of a waltz. I think there are 3 or 4 tracks that are variations on that. One of them descends into static, which really felt from some of the demos that I'd been hearing. The control was forever dangled in front of these characters, like a carrot on a stick. And it just forever out of grasp, but they were always under the illusion that they were able to catch it. And it's very realistic sentiment now I think about it. But yeah, I mean, once it had been established that this was a waltz, then yeah, it was, as you said, suddenly having images in my mind about the never-ending and sort of futile nature of these characters and their sense of agency. Everything stemmed from there, really. I think they were the first pieces that I wrote, apart from ever since we'd agreed to sort of move forward with this. I really loved this piece by, I think it's John Hughes. There's this tonal piece that just maintains the same notes throughout, and it just sort of trudges through the song and picks up more atmosphere and more depth, but it doesn't ever variate. It doesn't deviate from the starting note, and that was Masquerade.
Yes,
which was used, I've got to say, it was used extraordinarily well in the series, as I think it ended up being a humanity
frenzy check. Yes, I believe it's a frenzy check.
Yeah, as soon as you'd say frenzy check, then the piano, the lone dum came in like a bell, just tolling, and it would send shivers down my spine every single time.
I think you captured it beautifully. I think you captured the paranoia and the oppressive nature that a dark reflection of our own invites.
Yes.
Speaking to the characters that we had 3 very distinct characters, each very different in their characterization, but also in their music. The first one that jumps out is Kevin Morse's by Sean Flurl, and Morse's Code for his track. That
was my Giacchino approach to naming songs there. Yeah, probably my most cyberpunk track of Vampire the Masquerade, because it's got a bit of an 80s cop feel to it, I think.
It's definitely the most aggressive and the most kind of assertive.
I wanted to go with something that was noticeably cop, but in this world. So it had a lot of sort of darker, ethereal tones, but at the same time it had an 80s kick and synth. It really interested me having those 2 elements blended, to the point where I was listening back to it and going, I think this is great. I'm not sure though.
I think it's fantastic.
I really love it.
Yeah. And then we had Isabel's theme, Innocent.
Yeah.
She's naive and innocent in this series. What else did you draw upon? Or how did that translate into the music?
I found myself leaning towards people like the Cinematic Orchestra, really rich orchestral sounds, but like mixing that with something a little darker and a little edgier, because of course these characters are characters who live in this dark Adelaide.
Ellen's being a former nun helps with that, helps keep that gothic and darker.
I definitely had this idea of how the track would play out if it was playing with the acoustics of a church, having little choral elements, strange little organ-esque sounds coming in and out, because again, it's only it's only about getting aspects of this former self. But what I wanted to get across is you've got these character elements, and with Isabel, you've got this past, this religious past, and this sort of good nature in the core, but it's always in Night City, it's always in this dark Adelaide. These two things are always at war.
Which is the war inside all vampire characters is very heightened in her.
As you pointed out at the end of the last episode, that it fell on Ellen again to make or not make the killing blow. It does feel like there's a particular, like the soul of this place does seem to be in this track. It's way more symbiotic, the character in Adelaide in this track, than with Vincent and Kevin's tracks. Whether it's hubris or rage or something, is always holding its ground quite nicely. I always had a sense talking to Ellen about Isabel's character that she was part of it despite retaining that sort of pure, innocent part of herself. Like, it felt like she most naturally belonged.
And then, of course, we have Vincent.
Yes.
Who had a bit of a time.
Certainly did, yeah.
Yeah, that was hard to listen to.
So was the arc for Vincent sort of in place when you were writing music for him, or was it just did you work off the concept of the character?
I'd been in conversation with Chris about this, actually. He was filling me on how difficult everybody was finding the game, and or the experience rather, and
emotionally.
And I've had lots of people ask me to join. They all want to be part of it. It's like there's a bunch of me
included. I absolutely adore it.
So we're all masochists.
Yeah, you're all masochists. I love it.
Yeah, you'd be a stronger person on the other end, rather than a complete gibbering mess.
Jumping back to Vincent, there was he obviously loses a bit of his humanity and becomes a bit paranoid as a result. What kind of musical direction did you take to kind of draw attention to that, or show that had tweaked?
I found I was able to come up with Vincent's theme and just tweak it slightly, just to send it down a slightly different path. I mean, his main theme anyway is fairly morose and melancholic, which felt natural to me as a fellow genius. It was really easy to bring to life, but no, I'm an idiot. But it was very easy to get this idea of Vincent as this intellectual who has a very high opinion of himself, but is also prey to his own paranoias, and also not quite ready, I don't believe, for the powers that they find in their Adelaide adventure.
That ironically is what makes him ill-prepared, is that he believes he is ready.
Yes.
Whereas the two characters who are not, Isabel and Kevin, don't know that they are ready, and yet they are. Whereas Vincent thinks he is and isn't.
I had this idea of, as an intellectual, he has a fairly strong, if not clear, thought process. There's an assertiveness in the melody of his theme, but at the same time, as well as being quite confident, is very obviously a negative one. It sort of dwells in melancholy, and it also is quite foreboding, I think. The main theme that I had, which then I realised we're telling this story, we're following Vincent's arc. In the end, it was just about isolating some of those moments and creating, to begin with, a sort of introduction to the main theme, which is actually quite quietly frenetic, if that can be a thing. It was like all these constituent parts hadn't yet joined, and they were trying to find this haven before they could join and become this theme. And then the third one is just it's just the melody by itself, with very little holding it up. It's just quite alone. It's hard to sort of put all of this into words without it sounding completely wanky, but I think ultimately it's just about demonstrating the fact that for everything that Vincent has or thinks he has, he's pretty much alone and quite helpless when it all comes down to it.
I think it's beautiful. It's wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us remotely, Paul. Thank you for all your work on the music so far. There's a couple more episodes. We're going to discuss a few more things related to the vampire. If you'd like to hear more of what we do, make sure you subscribe to us on your podcatcher of choice, Baby Beard Media. And Paul, where can they find One Good Thing?
So, yeah, we're One Good Thing on all good podcatchers. If you want to follow us on Twitter or Facebook, it's at OGT Pod, unmemorably. We're everywhere, including Spotify now. So just give us a listen. We're sometimes positive. Yeah, and I also have My Vamp and Cyberpunk albums available on SoundCloud. If you want to just go and listen to them there, it's soundcloud.com/Love Traitor. And yeah, there will be more soon.
Yeah, and if you want to be positive or negative to us, you can find us on our socials at Baby Beard Media. We've also got a Patreon, which you can sign up to for some extra goodies. And we hope to see you soon. I've been Phil.
I've been Chris.
I've been Paul.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Adelaide by Night is a Baby Beard Media production. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And all our podcasts are available on Spreaker, YouTube, and all good podcatchers. Portions of the materials are the copyrights and trademarks of White Wolf Entertainment AB and are used with permission. All rights reserved. For more information, please visit white-wolf.com. This season of Roll2Cast is made by fans, for fans, and is not officially licensed material of White Wolf Entertainment.